But I think a lot would be different if Stone Cold was paralyzed and his career was over at SummerSlam. I don't know if Vince McMahon would have told Bret Hart 1 month later that he couldn't afford his contract anymore, and I don't know if the screw job would have ever happened. Vince McMahon, I thought, was going to go with Stone Cold, and that was kind of his future. He saw the future in Stone Cold, and he was kind of, putting everything behind him, which is why he didn't mind letting go of Bret Hart. But if Stone Cold would have gotten paralyzed tragically at SummerSlam, WWE would have found themselves in a lot tougher of a dogfight with WCW. They might have even still won. It would have taken longer, but WCW, they still would have crumbled. The WWE, if they could have just plugged along and survived, they could have just let WCW destroy themselves. But with Stone Cold, coming on the map and how WWE just exploded, the battle just became so one-sided. But around the time of SummerSlam, WWE was still struggling against WCW and Nitro and the NWO. I shudder to think what would have happened. Still think we would have had The Rock. The Rock would have probably just been bigger than ever. He would have been even bigger. Think about how popular he and Stone Cold were together. Without Stone Cold and it was just The Rock, he would have been the man. And maybe they could have rode Shawn Michaels a little longer. If Stone Cold, wouldn't have gotten injured, I don't know if all the booking would have still gone on the same way. He really wasn't involved in the world title picture, but if Stone Cold would have been paralyzed, maybe they never would have had the Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker casket match at the Royal Rumble that caused Shawn Michaels injury, and put him on the shelf for 4.5 years. So there's a lot of things that could have gone differently, and we could be looking at a different business. I think, the WWE had weathered the storm enough by that point. They were just, by then Raw is War had started. They had the 2-hour show. They were going live. They were more competitive. The shitty days of the tiny arenas and the taped Raws and the hokey gimmicks, and WWE struggling to make payments and shit like that, those were gone. I think business was slowly getting better, and I think that if Stone Cold would have gotten paralyzed, yet we never would have had the Attitude Era that we know, but I still think WWE could have survived and eventually won the war against WCW. I think they could have done it with Shawn, Bret, and The Rock. I think that would have been more than enough, plus all the other new characters they developed, the Edges, the Christians, guys like that. I still think, just because they lost their star doesn't mean the WWE's creative wheels aren't going to be turning anymore. They're still going to be coming up with ways to compete, and Vince McMahon's never going to lay down without a fight. So if Austin would have gotten paralyzed, that would have been a devastating blow to the company and to the business as we know it. But I think the WWE would have plugged along and found an alternate solution, and, it probably would have just been The Rock.